You're listening to How to Stan, the podcast all about both specific fandoms and fandom culture as a whole. For more information about the show and the other show that I do, 17 Karat K-Pop, visit 17karatkpop.weebly.com. You can also go to 17karatkpop.weebly.com/how to stan for more specific information about this podcast. Enjoy the show. You're listening to a 4-part mini-series for How to Stan about television fandoms. Part 1 is about television shows that developed quite a passionate fan base and how they did it. Part 2 is about how fans have saved shows and renewed them. Part 3 is about fans promoting in other ways their favorite shows. And Part 4 is about crowd-funded TV shows and movies and fans when they actually fund projects and all of the implications and concerns surrounding that. Part 1, developing fan interest in shows and keeping them invested in the stories. What leads to a successful television show with a passionate fan base is, of course, based on quality, but it also inherently has to do with quantity of viewers and making sure that enough fans are passionate about the show to keep it alive and talked about. And that was a key driver for Pretty Little Liars' success. So aside from the quality, the actual quantity was also enough to keep the show in renewal mode for so long, and then it had the spin-off show with the perfectionist and everything. And so what made Pretty Little Liars work so well and just reach such a broad audience were a couple of things. Pretty Little Liars is a teen drama that was on ABC Family, and what they did so well is basically master the art of social media marketing before that was common, before that was just a given that every show would do that kind of campaigning. After over 2 seasons of Pretty Little Liars had already aired in 2012 as part of a thing to tide fans over during the show's season 3 summer break, there was this web series called Pretty Dirty Secrets. So in 2012, this aired during the summer. It was an 8-part web series, and remember back in 2012, having a web show was not really as normal as it is today. And each episode was viewed by a range of 200,000 to 600,000 people, which totaled up to collectively over 3 million viewers tuned in for that web series. Then in October of that year was an event held on Facebook called Pretty Little Liars Halloween Party. And the Facebook app actually had a Pretty Little Liars Halloween Party feature already open in Facebook that September to get people to start talking about this event early and really hype it up like a party invitation had happened. And this corresponded with the premiere of a new Halloween episode of Pretty Little Liars. It involved a Q&A both during and after the episode aired. The episode ended and then was followed by, through Facebook again, a sneak peek at the winter premiere of the show. So it doubled as a screening event for fans, a Q&A. It also, of course, served as a special sponsorship opportunity because if you participated in this Facebook Live event, you got the chance to enter this Galaxy phone sweepstakes. ABC Family has a partnership with Samsung, so that worked out for them. And this whole party event that happened virtually before virtual parties were the norm for sure, is that it ended up actually having 1.1 million comments on social media about this event, over 1,300 public Facebook posts about it, and 1.1 million tweets approximately about this Halloween party event that was hosted through Facebook. Then there was this thing launched before the midwinter premiere in January of 2013, and launched 1 week before that premiere was a countdown calendar. This basically served as like a calendar, an online advent calendar of sorts, but each day of the calendar you would find a new surprise to open that had to do with Pretty Little Liars. So it would have to do with like a PDF maybe, a behind the scenes image or video clip from the set. Even one time it was this leaked script excerpt. So all these things to add to the suspense as you got hyped for the mid-season winter premiere. And then the premiere night, it all culminated after this countdown calendar. You reached the last advent door, so to speak. It all culminated in that premiere night, which involved this Twitter-sponsored scavenger hunt online, where one of the Pretty Little Liar characters, Mona, would tweet these hidden messages on Twitter, and fans were expected to piece together what her tweets actually meant, decipher them, and use those clues to gain access through solving the puzzles that would gain them their access to bonus scenes that corresponded with the episode they were watching. So if you didn't unlock the code, you would have never seen those extra scenes of the episode, but they were very related to what you had seen if you just watched that episode on TV. But it was exclusive content for code breakers who engaged with this material online. Because of this, Mona's account gained 54,000 followers within the span of 4 days, and over 17,000 tweets ended up mentioning Mona's account just during the episode, not even afterwards, but already 17,000 tweets talking about it. At the time of this mid-season premiere, Pretty Little Liars already made up for 52% of Twitter activity, so needless to say, Pretty Little Liars truly did come before and lay the groundwork for shows after it when it comes to social media marketing savvy. And it actually reached 1.4 million Twitter mentions before any other TV show ever did in Twitter's history, the fastest to reach 1.4 million mentions. And then in mid-season 3, there was a suspect tracker that launched, which could be accessed again through Facebook or through the actual show's page and website. So you could vote through the suspect tracker. There were 12 suspects to choose from, and each suspect had a separate Twitter account. So you could vote with tweeting hashtags like Paige is guilty, or hashtag Lucas is guilty, or whoever you thought was guilty. You could tweet the hashtag and follow that suspect's account on Twitter, and then look at other suspects' Twitter accounts and try to suss out who was the actual suspect, who is guilty, and you could follow their tweets and try to figure out which of the 12 was the actual person involved. And it basically allowed fans too, by reposts and likes and everything, to look at what other fans were saying using the same hashtags. It allowed them to see what the conversation was, and this clue led me to believe it was actually them, or this clue led me to believe it was them. But then of course you could also think in circles, like did the official account like that tweet just because it would suddenly make you second guess yourself, and it was just to throw you off? So it really kept people talking a lot on social media. So Pretty Little Liars kept up its status as most tweeted about television show for years, and over 136,000 views of the suspect tracker showed up within the first 48 hours of this event happening. And lastly, there were a lot of times during breaks, hiatuses between seasons or parts of season premieres, when Pretty Little Liars creators and cast members would have online Q&As. So to sum it up, what Pretty Little Liars did was they teamed up with existing apps like Twitter and Facebook, and they helped launch and promote this Pretty Dirty Secrets web series for keeping the show talked about during a hiatus. They had the Pretty Little Liars Halloween Party event to keep people's excitement up for the winter premiere that they showed a sneak peek of at the end of the night. They had the countdown calendar that led up to a premiere event, and they had the suspect tracker event, which kept the mystery alive and talked about among fans, and regular Q&As with fans were happening for the cast and the creators of the show. That's how Pretty Little Liars really did take over the world, and really in viewership ratings skyrocketed thanks to the quantity of fans who were able to get invested in the story through any outlet. Maybe they viewed it through Facebook, maybe they were introduced to the show through Twitter, maybe just through television, but there were so many outlets that were unprecedented at the time to get a show through. And so that content was so accessible that it was quite groundbreaking for that time. On the other hand, there are some shows who gain a following based mostly on quality over quantity. Not to say that Pretty Little Liars is bad quality, but I'm just thinking in terms of marketing and what actually led to their success. It's more interesting to talk about Pretty Little Liars from a marketing standpoint because of the precedents they set. But if we're looking at the actual quality, the TV show Lost was praised for that, and there is this study that was done in this television studies journal called Lost in a Great Story, Evaluation in Narrative Television, that basically compiles arguments for Lost's high quality as a TV show into 4 aesthetic categories. First category is unity of purpose. Each Lost episode is part of the actual storyline. There are no one-off episodes that feel like they were a filler episode or just unnecessary or threw the traditional storyline out the window. Everything stuck to not necessarily stuck to the script, but stuck to this formula, the expectations that viewers had, and they appreciated that consistency and the fact that every episode was part of the bigger puzzle and nothing seemed irrelevant. So those are the logistical reasons why the Pretty Little Liars marketing strategy worked so well. But aside from that, what actually tactically was so impressive? Because not every television show effectively communicates and promotes via social media. How did this formula actually work? What pulled it off? Well, what people suspect is that mainly it had to do with a couple things. One was the partnerships, like I said, with Samsung, that helped, and having that funding and the investors in your work. Pretty Little Liars was the first show to do something like this, where they basically partnered with Neutrogena, and they became this first source of pop culture to use this Twitter feature called Amplify, and they used the Amplify feature so that a Pretty Little Liars ad would be mixed with a Neutrogena conversation, like a sponsored by Neutrogena audio, and so that allowed for social media promotion of a sponsor of the show as well as the show itself. Also, ABC Family was very and has been very in tune with who its audience is, with a median age of 27 and a lot of young people watching the show. They knew where to put their money and resources in marketing. They knew it would be where social media is, and they could use that information then from social media fan activity to keep going and deciding what kind of content to put on TV that would resonate with the target audience that was their main viewership source. Also, they had evidence to generate buzz about the event that happened through existing apps. That's the biggest reason, arguably, is on the business side of things. They chose to work with Twitter and Facebook, and some shows have tried to have their own specific app or just do their own totally brand new thing, but ABC Family spent their time and energy elsewhere because they just worked with pre-existing apps, and that helped free up their time and resources towards actually figuring out how to tailor their message for the specific demographic they were looking at. And so that led to a lot of success. And actually, the ABC Family Vice President of Marketing, Creation, and Branding, Nigel Cox-Hagan, said, quote, "Our approach is responsive marketing. When we see interest in our show or on a particular cast member, we know to pick up on it and to feed that interest." Which kind of sums up how ABC Family's strategy works, is that they are very receptive to the feedback and the conversation, and they adapt along with that conversation. And that unity of purpose was furthered because there were clearly no grab bag happenings where they were just doing an extra episode or an extra thing here or there for the money, because Lost from the outset decided when its end date would be. So fans had a heads up 3 years in advance that the show was going to end in 3 years. And knowing the end date helped both the actual creators and scriptwriters and the fans prepare themselves for the journey to be that long. So it didn't feel too stretched out of a journey. It didn't feel too rushed either. They kind of knew what the pacing should be, and so subconsciously that really helped them accept where the show was going, because they knew it was wrapping up, or they knew it wasn't wrapping up yet, so that allowed them to make peace more with some plot points. So that has to do with the unity of purpose of a show that is just good in terms of its quality. Second variable is forensic fandom. This concept refers to fans not just being passive viewers of a show, but being willing to engage with the material, which is something that Pretty Little Liars did as well, where fans wouldn't just watch the show, they would then feel like the detectives that kept talking about the show and debating among other fans who the actual suspect was, following those different Twitter accounts, following happenings on social media, trying to solve a mystery essentially. So they could become very active viewers through what the term is forensic fandom, when they actually try to piece together timelines of events, or they theorize about symbolism or Easter eggs, and it's a way to really get emotionally invested in a show and have it become a part of your daily conversations and thoughts. 3, narrative complexity. Lost episodes have a lot of suspense in them and moments of surprise, but not ones that seem out of the ordinary for the script. There is a spoiler alert. There's quite a plot twist when, in season 3, for example, Jack has these flashbacks that are revealed to actually have been flash forwards. So moments like that really scramble the fans and leave them wanting to decipher so much more when they realize that this upends all the timeline they've been piecing together. So keeping fans on their toes for sudden plot twists is a key part of keeping them invested in a story and not getting bored of it. And number 4, the aesthetics of surprise, which goes along with that. And what this author argues is that Lost fits into this category because it is viewed as not being in a specific box in terms of genre. So it has to surprise you more because it doesn't have all of the elements maybe of a traditional mystery or thriller or supernatural drama or whatever you want to call it. It kind of checks every box a little and also doesn't. So it also has these fleshed out characters that really resonate because just like the plot points in Lost, the characters are not super open books. You have to spend time with the show to get to know the characters better and see their true colors. It's not all revealed or obvious during the first episode. It's not laid out right away. You evolve and learn about the characters as they grow and evolve during the show. So that has to do with the show's continuation. Lost was viewed as a high-quality show just from an aesthetic standpoint in terms of its unity of purpose, its forensic fandom ability to have that forensic fandom, narrative complexity, and aesthetics of surprise. Those are the 4 key markers that can make a show appealing and keep viewers' attention. Some more research I'd like to touch on comes from a book called Millennial Fandom, Television Audiences in the Transmedia Age. It's by Louisa Ellen Stein, and she compiled a set of case studies about television shows and their fandoms, from Pretty Little Liars to Glee to the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And she credits these millennial TV watchers as really helping normalize fandom behavior and helping improve the reputation of fans as just being it's normal to be that invested in a TV show, and she gives them credit with helping normalize that notion. She also talks about how fans use those television shows to help shape their own self-images and how they view themselves as part of society and what their place is. And she really credits fans with, through this one chapter, the book called An Invitation to Transgress, fans have this ability to add personal touches to mass media content. They're able to take it and turn it into their own personal canvas of self-exploration in social media content, which she was very impressed by. So overall, she tries to give millennial fans a lot more agency and a better reputation when viewing them as pop culture consumers. She insists that this is not just them liking a show because it's popular, but they all have a personal reason for liking it that deserves merits. And she also calls out some of the media's blind spots when it comes to trying to get to millennial audiences. She actually didn't really approve of ABC Family's approach, calling it too corporate and packaged, and she argues more for the need for fandoms to really come out from the grassroots in order to last, which can be debated because Pretty Little Liars isn't really talked about much anymore that I know of. At least the original show isn't, so maybe it was a passing fad and wouldn't have been if they had been less corporate with their approach to creating and maintaining a fandom. But that's up for debate, and that's what Stein proposes. She basically argues that you can't try so hard through a social media campaign to get fans that pandering is obvious and the relatability is clearly a farce. And so she gives examples about times when ABC Family has had these contests and things where you submit videos and things like that for compilations that might air on TV. But when TV channels do that, she points out how they're really heavily filtering and monitoring what videos they decide to post and upload on the TV. So it's an opportunity for fan expression, but in a very specific, limited way based on their criteria for what makes your video submission deemed applicable, if that makes sense. So she talks about a lot more in that book, which I will link to on my site as I do with these sources that I talk about during the show. Last thing about this section before we talk about fans who saved their TV shows. There is this other scholar called Mark Andrzejewicz, and he views TV audiences as actually being exploited a lot for helping with unpaid brand creation and loyalty maintenance for these TV shows. Unofficial, unpaid PR agents giving them a bunch of free PR work. He discusses this website called Television Without Pity, aka TWOP, as an example of a site that mixes the work of volunteer and paid staffers, and many more volunteers than paid staffers write for that site. It is a site freelancers use to post longer posts about television, but also fans are generating a bunch of comments and discussion on the site as well that can be equally influential. Unfortunately, someone can put their all into a long-form piece for their show, but people may look at the comment section and those get more attention and impact. So he encourages us to keep that in mind, how much unpaid versus paid labor is going into promoting shows. And he said, quote, "The show is no longer the final product, but rather the raw material to which value is added by the labor of recappers and forum contributors." He argues that now shows are not, like he said, the final product. Shows are a tool, a canvas for fans to work on for free. He surveyed a lot of people. 1/3 of the respondents total ended up saying that they watched more TV than they would have without knowing about the existence of this website, Television Without Pity, because the site helped provide cheat sheets. It's essentially SparkNotes for TV. And so a big chunk of survey respondents said that convinced them to watch more shows because it gave them the summary and then they felt more like maybe that's a show I'd be interested in. So he said, quote, "The promoters of mass customization encourage us to take on the duties of consumer interaction in order presumably to help craft a product that addresses our specific needs and concerns and for which not incidentally we might be willing to pay more, essentially buying back the added value we contributed." He goes on to talk more in this piece about how consumerism is driving decisions ultimately, and that the information that is provided to people who work on TV shows, a lot of it comes from fans and people who are not actually paid for that work. But he doesn't view that as being exploitation 100%. He does acknowledge that fans willingly do this. It's not like they're held against their will to promote a show. And he does view some reciprocal benefits. Fans give the creators and writers PR for the show and ideas to work with, and the writers in turn give fans what they want. After all, fans can get so up in arms when a plot doesn't go the way they had hoped or when a character arc changes too much and they don't like that. So when fans get upset with the show content, now they have the ability to just defend their interpretation of what they want to see happen, and therefore it makes it seem like it is an exchange. So even if they're not financially compensated, they're compensated through their idea being validated and added into the canon of that TV show. So that is another take on it, but we will talk more about fan labor in a minute when after the break we go into part 2 where we talk about saving shows. So you get invested in shows. Now part 2 is how you save it and keep it on the air, and many examples of when fans have done that. Part 2, fans essentially saving shows and keeping them relevant in the mass media conversation. Passionate television fandoms were already being reported on back in the 60s, when in 1962 CBS had this surge of protest letters sent to it after canceling The Twilight Zone. At that time, 31 states in the United States had fan clubs for The Twilight Zone, and the show was getting approximately 500 fan letters a week, which for the early 60s was a huge amount. And similarly, the Avengers TV show that lasted from 1961 to 1969 was supposed to go off the air 2 years earlier in 1967, but stayed around and would not have if it were not for the protest letters that were sent to ABC at the time. Then in 1969, the Star Trek show was canceled. Fans of the Star Trek show ended up marching to the Burbank headquarters for NBC. 300 students protested the cancellation of that show, and so Paramount brought it back for a movie in 1979. And of course, Star Trek has been renewed again and again since then. Star Trek Enterprise was canceled in 2005, but then fans started emerging with all sorts of content. Music videos, podcasts, fan art, you name it. There was Star Trek fandom stuff happening in 2005. And then the New Voyages ended up being downloaded 30 million times. So again, the show keeps being revived and is still talked about to this day somewhat because fans have kept up this sustained enthusiasm for Star Trek, especially every time it's threatened to go off the air or otherwise its status is in jeopardy. Fans jump to the rescue. And the 1990s was a time when that was actually leaned into intentionally by a lot of people behind TV shows like Twin Peaks and The X-Files. 1990s shows were designed with fandoms in mind, what fans would like, what they would passionately be receptive towards, and would possibly protest. That was speculated. Okay, how do we make a show that will make fans so passionate about the show that they would protest if it went off the air? More recent examples of this happening, there's a show called Chuck that was able to stay on the air longer because fans were the ones responsible for getting Chuck a partnership deal with Subway, which allowed for frequent and overt Subway product placement throughout the show. Fans even went to a Subway station in person in this March on the night of the season finale, and they were led by one of the stars of the show, so they had the cast seal of approval here. It was kind of very legitimized as an official organization, an official PR group for the show Chuck. And it was a way to really avoid the understandable common product placement critiques because they were the ones who were responsible for those product placements. The renewed version of the show that came due to fan backlash for the cancellation of Chuck, though, it clearly showed its lower budget than the original Chuck, and it had some awkward pacing. Writers were clearly unsure how to go about making this version when they had already wrapped up the show a bit, and so it was hard to know if it would be renewed yet again. It was hard to decide how to tie up loose ends, so the ending was kind of abrupt and incomplete, but they did bring back the show for a short period of time thanks to fan demand. Some more examples. One Day at a Time was a show that got canceled by Netflix, but then it was saved by Pop TV after fan backlash on social media. The show Community got canceled by NBC, but then this thing called Yahoo Screen picked it up for a 6th season after fans campaigned online for Community to come back. Brooklyn Nine-Nine was canceled by Fox, but within 48 hours, NBC swooped in to save the day after the fan backlash was so immediate online. And Shadowhunters was canceled, but fans tried to get it back, so this is an example of when it doesn't always go the way fans want. Shadowhunters was not renewed despite fans' attempts, but they did have a huge uncancel Shadowhunters campaign on social media, and the fans collectively tried to persuade the creators and show their passion to the show and prove that the viewership would be there for them by raising $25,000 for the Trevor Project in the show's name, and also sending a banner to directly fly right over Netflix's headquarters. They really pulled out all the stops to show their passion and prove they would view the show, but unfortunately the ratings still were not to the liking of the people that hosted the show Shadowhunters, so the show did go off the air. But that just goes to show that fans are willing to go the extra mile in the physical world, not just online, for their defending their shows of choice, but it doesn't always go the expected way.